Let's discuss the ongoing face-off between the United States and Iran and the controversy surrounding the Ukrainian plane crash. Global Affairs analyst Calvin Dark joins me on the news, and also with me is a professor of political science and international relations, Michael Mbanaso. Thank you both for joining us. Let's begin with you, Calvin Dark. What do you make of this new accusation against Iran that it might be responsible for the Ukrainian plane crash?
Well, I think one of the things that's difficult for Americans is that President Trump has always had a credibility problem. And I think there was always an assumption that there was something going on with the plane crash that had to do with Iran's response to the killing of General Soleimani. But what's happening now is because of the way that President Trump is denigrating Democrats and not allowing his administration to share with key members of Congress the intelligence that led him to the drone strike on the general. Now we're in a crisis of credibility because we don't know exactly who to believe. I think it's ironic that for the United States, the most credible person in this whole situation is Prime Minister Trudeau, because his press conference, gave us the facts we needed, but let us know there's still more to come out.
All right, let's come to you, Professor. We know that Qasem Soleimani was killed in Iraq. Also, the missiles fired by Iran was also fired at U.S. bases in Iraq. Has any of these countries violated the sovereignty of Iraq?
Thank you very much. First, I think we need to understand this in a broader context of Middle East politics and the historical context of U.S.-Iranian relations. For instance, after 9/11, Iraq invited U.S., as U.S. may claim, to help them fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and the issue of Soleimani could also be interpreted as a defense against an imminent attack by the U.S., because there's a UN provision for that. And this goes under the recent, what is been termed as target killings. And Israel sort of popularized this in 2000 when it targeted alleged Palestinian terrorists in the occupied territories. So governments tend to interpret these laws of self-defense in different forms. So on the one hand, the sovereignty of Iraq may not have been violated because U.S. was invited to come to Iraq in the first place. And of course, since after 9/11, the game sort of changed in terms of the war on terrorism. So preemptive strike, defense against imminent and other real apparent attacks are interpreted by governments to be allowed under the UN Charter. But of course, some may not agree.
All right, let me stay with you, Professor. You talked about the U.S. Might not have violated any international law in the killing of Qasem Soleimani, but Qasem Soleimani had 5 other people with him in Iraq who were also killed along with him. So, as long as U.S. can justify the killing of Qasem, but under international law, can they justify the killing of the 5 other people?
Not exactly. I'm not saying it's justified, but this is what they will claim. They will claim that that imminent attack was being planned. So we have to go back to see where this takes roots. It's been referred to as targeted killings. Israel had used it. Since the global war on terrorism after 9/11 attacks on the U.S., it's been used with drone strikes. I'm not suggesting that it's lawful, but the governments interpret this act of self-defense as lawful to them. So the governments make the interpretations. So in this instance, the U.S. could claim that the killing or targeting of Soleimani was in an act of self-defense. And those other persons or personnel with him, U.S. may also claim that they were part of the group that may be planning for the imminent attack. You may recall that a few days prior, U.S. ambassador in Iraq came under attack by some Iraqi militia people. So all of this could be seen as additional imminent attack. For instance, President Trump said that he didn't think Soleimani came to Iraq to discuss the weather or soccer or football, for instance. This is just a joke. So he must have come there to plan additional attacks on the U.S. This is their claim. And again, the governments interpret this UN charter the way they see fit. So Israel has used it, U.S. has been using it since 9/11. So
all right.
They've broadened the definition. That is the issue. They've broadened the definition.
All right. To you, Calvin Dak. Now, the U.S. House of Representatives has voted on a resolution to limit President Trump's ability to make war on Iran. What do you make of that, and what does that mean for him at this moment?
Well, I had a little bit of trouble hearing you, but what I believe is you were asking about the resolution with Iraq or from the U.S. Congress?
Yes.
From Iraq or the U.S. Congress?
Yes, to limit President Trump's power on attacking Iran.
Yes. From the U.S. Congress, it's going to be really interesting because there's support, obviously, for limiting the powers of the president here, but the problem is that he has to sign it, and then there would have to be, a higher majority to approve it in both houses. So I don't know exactly what effect it will have. But I do think it's interesting that this issue brings out something that even Republicans don't agree with, and that is limiting the president's power during war. Now, President Trump is, of course, saying that he doesn't really believe that it has any effect, and he's playing it down. But a lot of people are saying that it really does affect him because he believes this limits his powers as president.
All right. Professor, what would be the role of other countries now in mediating on this issue, just in case there's room for negotiations? What would be the role of other countries?
Well, the good news is that President Trump has invited or suggested that NATO countries should step in to assist in the escalation process. The other good news also that may not be known to maybe some of your audience is that there have been some back channels as reported in the intelligence community, that back channels between U.S. and Iran through the Swedish diplomats. So some discussions are going on behind the scenes to calm the situation down. So other countries, particularly those that were part of the nuclear deal agreement with Iran, have also been suggested to step in, although China, for instance, is suggesting that the root cause of this crisis was Trump pulling out of the Iran deal. But now he's reaching out to them to step in so that the situation can be managed. So Sweden is playing a very crucial role in the back channel diplomacy.
All right. Calvin, let's come to you now. We know that Iraq earlier was calling for U.S. Troops to leave Iraq. What's the situation of things that, though the White House has said they are not ready to leave Iraq, what's the situation of that now?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. Can you repeat that?
We know that Iraq, some members of parliament in Iraq are calling for U.S. troops to leave Iraq. How is that going, and how is the Pentagon responding to that?
Well, I think the way that they're going to respond is that you have, obviously, this is an election year. You've got political considerations because President Trump obviously campaigned on getting out of the endless wars, and I think that many of his voters, many American voters, are in favor of that. However, you've got to look at the long term, that one of the things the Pentagon doesn't want is to make a political decision that will end up upending the progress and stability that we've seen. So that's going to be what we have to look after. Will President Trump and those around him think beyond November 2020 on how they're going to pull out of Iraq and how they're going to change the presence of the U.S. in the Middle East? Or are they going to do it purely on political political reasons, then we don't know exactly what will bring more stability to rates.
Global Affairs analyst Calvin Dack and Professor of International Relations and Political Science Michael Mbanaso. Many thanks to both of you for joining us on this hour.